You need to be ready for the FPL double game week 36 and blank game week 37 coming up. We're going to be discussing the teams that could potentially be doubling in game week 36. Then you are well prepared on who to bring in, and then those teams would then be blanking in game week 37. We're also going to be discussing the game week 33 and game week 34 double and what the best chip strategy is and what the best approach is to them double and blank game weeks coming up that are confirmed. If you're an FPL fan and you're not subscribed to this channel, do hit subscribe on this channel. This is the place to be for all the latest FPL content and news. And please do drop a like while you're down there as well. It'll be very greatly appreciated. So as I say, we'll get onto the double game weeks in 36 and 37 later on in the video. But just to start off with the confirmation of the double game weeks in 33. Starting off, we have Arsenal have a double game week against Ipswich and Crystal Palace. A very favourable double there. Of course, Gabriel is now out injured for the season, so that's not ideal there. As far as Arsenal assets, of course, David Raya in goal was a great option. Saliba at the back, potentially Kivior, he's going to come in and maybe take that centre-back spot instead of Gabriel. And then, of course, Saka is looking at like a great captain option in that double game week 33 when you're looking at it there. There's a few other players that could potentially be a shout for captaincy, but Saka is definitely one of them that is leading the way. And then hopefully then he will be kind of fully fit again in game week 33 and ready to go. Obviously, he just came on off the bench in game week 30. So then there's also Aston Villa as well, which do have a tougher double game week, but it is a double game week nevertheless. They have their double game week against Newcastle at home and then Man City away. Now, we're going to discuss Aston Villa in a little bit more detail later on in the video as far as what could potentially happen with them later on down the line in the season. But looking at Aston Villa options, Asensio came in off the bench and literally got a goal and assist. Unbelievable from him off the bench. Morgan Rogers has got pretty nailed on minutes, you'd say. He started pretty much all the games for Aston Villa whenever he's been fit. So Morgan Rogers is a great option for me as well. Rashford's maybe an outside shout as well as that Ollie Watkins. I do prefer Asensio and Rogers. And then defensively, if you want to get 100% nailed, you probably go for Martinez in goal. There's also Contra as well, which when he's fit again, he's pretty much a player that plays every single time. So I like the look of Contra at just 4.4 million. There's also Martinez as well, as I said before, the goalkeeper, who is of course going to be playing every single game as well. So then we also have Crystal Palace who've been confirmed to double in game week 33. Of course, we know they double in game week 32 as well. So a triple on Crystal Palace, even though the double game weeks aren't exactly the best. This double game week 33 being against Bournemouth and Arsenal, it's not bad, it's not great though having Arsenal. But as I say, it's back-to-back double game weeks. A triple up on Crystal Palace is obviously the way to go. So at the end of the day, just pick the three favourite Palace players that you like the most. I like Daniel Munoz still, even though defensively Palace didn't get a clean sheet against Southampton. Very frustrating there. I still do like Daniel Munoz for the attacking output, potentially the way he's been this season. There's also Eze and Sarr. There's also Mateta as well. So there's 4 players, and there's also Henderson in goal if you wanted to go for him. So there's 5 decent Palace assets. It's just a case of who you personally prefer. Then, of course, we have the Man City double game week in game week 33, which is also being confirmed. Now, Savio did very well in the last match, picking up all 3 bonus points and getting an assist for Man City in game week 30. And then, as well as, of course, now they're double game week in 33. So Savio looks good right now, but is he going to be absolutely nailed in a few weeks' time? You can't absolutely, you wouldn't put a lot of money on that, certainly. So Savino's not a nailed-on player for double game week 33. I'd still be holding off if you don't have him and kind of wait until game week 33 to bring in the Man City asset, the third one. The other 2 I just think are pretty straightforward picks, and they pick themselves, which is, of course, Guardiola at the back, pretty nailed on, as nailed on as you're going to get for a Man City defender. And then with the injury of Erling Haaland, marmoush I think is just a great option, and potentially a captain shout. A very nice double against Everton and Aston Villa. So Marmoush a great captain shout for game week 33. But Saka's also a great captain shout. I'd say they are the 2 standout captains. And as I say, I'd keep an eye on Savio if you don't already own him, and just see how he gets on in the next few weeks. And then if he's still playing in game week 33 and he looks like he's going to play in both them double game week games, then I'd say he's a great transfer in. Then as for the blank game week 34, of course we know that the teams that then double in game week 33 will then blank in game week 34. Now if you have your free hit chip available to you, that's a great opportunity to play that free hit chip in game week 34 potentially. As I say, you're going to be loading up your teams of pretty much players that are going to be doubling in game week 33. So in game week 34, you'll probably just free hit out of them most likely. Of course, then that is Arsenal, Aston Villa, Crystal Palace and Man City, all then blank game week. And the fixtures that going ahead, the Nottingham Forest game did end up getting put into game week 34. There was question marks on when that game would end up getting put into, because Nottingham Forest progressed to the FA Cup semi-final. But due to the fact that Nottingham Forest in game week 33 playing the Monday night and game week 35 also playing the Monday night, couldn't get a game in there in the game week 33 double, so they've had to fit into that game week 34. So there's no blank game week for Nottingham Forest. They have a normal game week in game week 33. And then in game week 34, they then play as well against Brentford. Now, shout out to Johnny C for this graphic. This is the full graphic of the doubles and blank game weeks that are coming up. Of course, now we know that they've already been confirmed. We know Crystal Palace double in game week 32 and the game week in 33. That's at 90%. It's actually now 100% because it's now been updated. But these are the chances of the double and blank game weeks in game week 36 and game week 37. So Arsenal do have a very unlikely chance of a double game week of just 10%. We don't need to discuss that too much. Very unlikely that Arsenal will double in game week 36. Now, looking at then, we have Aston Villa, the second team down there. You can see a 49% chance given the odds of a double game week in 36. This is down to the FA Cup. They're not, Aston Villa are the favourites for their game in the FA Cup against Crystal Palace. They do play, so it's a choice of either Crystal Palace or Aston Villa in terms of a double game week in 36. Potentially, obviously, nothing's confirmed yet. We don't know 100%, but if Aston Villa do go on to win that FA Cup semi-final, they've got a good chance then of double game weekend in game week 36. And Crystal Palace, they're 29%, not quite as high because they obviously aren't the favourites for that game in the FA Cup. But Aston Villa will be the favourites going into that semi-final game. So that gives them an opportunity right there to potentially have that double game week in 36. So Aston Villa players, we'll talk a little bit more, as I say, in detail after this section, but definitely there, good chance for double game week. So then Bournemouth also have a chance of double game week in game week 36 because they actually face Aston Villa in game week 37. So that game would then get moved forward to the game week 36, and then that would mean they're blanking 37 and playing 36. So Bournemouth's opponents in that game week is Aston Villa, who of course are still in the FA Cup, so it's all very FA Cup dependent. Also, as well as that, it also depends on Europa League fixtures and European fixtures in some of these teams as well when you're looking at Tottenham Hotspur and teams like that. So European games can actually affect it, especially the Europa League can affect these outcomes. So then you've also got Man City. You've got a 37% chance of double game weekend in game week 36. Now, it's very interesting here because these teams obviously double in game week 33, and then they're going to blank in 34, and they could potentially then double again in game week 36. Of course, depends on the FA Cup result for Man City, who are playing against Nottingham Forest, who have a 25% chance. So obviously, as Man City as the favourites against Nottingham Forest, despite Nottingham Forest actually being higher than Man City in the table. But I guess given the pedigree that Man City have got and doing well in competitions and cup competitions before, and playing at Wembley a lot more times than, of course, Nottingham Forest have in recent years, I guess Man City are the favourites for that reason. So Man City 37% chance, then Nottingham Forest 25% chance. As of course, as I say, that does depend on the FA Cup result outcome in the semi-final of those two games, in the Aston Villa game, and then as well as that, of course, the Man City and Nottingham Forest game as well. Now, Tottenham do have an increased chance of a double game week due to the fact that they are still in the Europa League, and in addition to that, they also play Crystal Palace as well. So as I say, if Crystal Palace did go through in the FA Cup, then that'll give Spurs a higher chance of double game week in 36. So Spurs have quite a high chance there at 44%, given the fact they have two opportunities to potentially double in game week 36. Then you have slight chances of double game weeks for West Ham United, and then as well as that, you have Wolves as well on 15% and 19%. And it could be some very kind double game weeks when you look at it. Man City could actually have a very nice double game week against Bournemouth in double game week 36, because that fixture will get moved forward from 37, and they also play Southampton in game week 36. So that is something that is very interesting, and as I say, if Man City do end up getting a double game week, that could be an unbelievable opportunity for, you know, at least, I mean, if you still have your chips, a triple captaincy, but I wouldn't be waiting for it for that long. But then in terms of just Man City assets and owning them, you've got a very favourable double with Southampton and Bournemouth there. It does look like a really nice double. So I've put this together, a little prediction between the double and blank game weeks for game week 36 and 37. So Aston Villa, of course, have the highest chance of a double game week, and those two fixtures would be against Bournemouth away and Spurs at home. Now, of course, this actually kind of plays into the strategy of loading up your team for players in game week 33, then kind of hoping for the best that these players can then double again in game week 36. So if you have a few Aston Villa players, double game week in 33, free hit them out in 34, and then hopefully by then we'll kind of have more concrete information on them double game week 36 potential fixtures. So, as I say, Aston Villa, it's not a bad double, it's not a great double. I'd say, to be fair, Bournemouth away, Bournemouth aren't playing well at the moment, and Spurs aren't even very good anymore. So that's actually not even a bad double there. Then Spurs have the second highest chance of the double game week. Of course, they play against Villa in the game week 37, so that could potentially get moved depending on if Aston Villa go through to the semi-final. And they play against Palace at home and then Aston Villa away. Again, that's not a terrible double right there for looking at some Spurs assets potentially as big differentials at that point. I mean, quite a lot of people might look to move towards them if they do go on to double game week. But as I say, that's not a bad double game week there for Spurs. Then you got Man City on a 37% chance. They actually have a really nice looking double game week, as I said before. Southampton away and Bournemouth at home is such a nice double game week for Man City, especially that Southampton fixture, of course. So I really like the look of those 2 fixtures in potentially double game week 36 if it does come through. Then, of course, we do have the Bournemouth game, which is playing against Villa and Manchester City. That's obviously with a chance of Man City game getting moved forward. 32% chance for Bournemouth. So overall, they're not a bad double game week, but not a great double game. Villa's not a bad game, but then Man City is a little bit tougher after that. So the other teams that could potentially double is Nottingham Forest, Wolves, West Ham, Arsenal and Brentford. But all of those teams have a lower chance than 25%. Forest having a 25% chance, the highest out of those. The rest are all below 20%. So those teams aren't as likely to double as these first 4 teams here, but of course it does depend on them FA Cup results. So just looking at some of the notes that I've made from the double game week 36 potential and the blank game week 37, just a little breakdown just so it's a little bit less confusing, because obviously we don't know 100% what's going to be happening yet, so I hope this breaks it down and explains things a little bit more. So Aston Villa do have the strongest chance of getting a double game week, and they have some really good looking options, to be fair, if they do want to get that double. Of course it depends on how they got in the Champions League as well. There's going to be a lot of rotation. That's the one issue with Aston Villa. They have a few nice fixtures and a potentially alright looking double as well. But there's a few good options, but it just depends on that rotation, as I say. There's Asensio, but of course then we saw him on the bench last game, which isn't ideal, but he came on and did incredibly well. Rodgers, I'd be the most confident in terms of minutes in an attacking sense of one of the midfielders and forwards. For defensive minutes, you're probably a bit more secure there. Looking at Konsa and Martinez, both great defensive options. And as I say, Martinez has got to play every single game. Konsa, when he's fit, has pretty much played every single game as well. So Aston Villa, they do have some decent assets, but obviously it's still a while to go, but it's definitely worth having these in our consideration and these thoughts definitely into our minds. Man City have a good chance of doubling as well in game week 36, as I said, and it's a very nice looking double for Man City. I like the look of Marmoush, of course. Marmoush, if Haaland's going to be out for a while, Marmoush is going to be a great value option. He's doing so well since he's signed. Of course, Gabriel as well. Great defensive option. Man City's most nailed on defensive asset other than... I mean, I'd say he's even more nailed than Edison. Because as I said here, Edison's even a risk, to be honest. I mean, I'm not even 100% confident because Pep's changed his keepers a few times around this season. He's brought in Ortega and he's brought Edison back in. So I do just think the 2 best options are Marmoush and Gabriel. And then for game week 33, it's kind of just to wait and see and look at how Savino's getting on, if Savino can keep his place. Then if Crystal Palace do win the FA Cup, then they could win the FA Cup semi-final, then they could also potentially double, so there's some options from there. There's a lot of different outcomes in it, as I say, it's difficult to call. I've said here, it's very difficult to call with the percentage chances. It's all wait and see, and there's no guarantee there's even a double game week in 36 at all, but as I say, the chance is quite a decent chance. It's an expected fixture is 11.34, and the expected blanks is 8.91, so there could potentially be 1 or 2 teams doubling in game week 36, which is definitely quite exciting and definitely something we need to be aware of. So if this video did help you out, please do drop a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new around here, it'd be very greatly appreciated. If you watch this point, you may as well hit subscribe. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.